Amari was born in America, but the spirit of his ancestors has always called him back to Africa. Now, he is returning to his father's village to take his rightful place as king. But the land is troubled. The balance between the village and the spirit world has been broken, and Amari must face challenges greater than he ever imagined. Guided by the wisdom of Mama Zola and supported by his love Zola, Amari embarks on a journey filled with ancient spirits, powerful trials, and a fight to restore harmony. Will he prove worthy of his crown? Join us as we explore the trials, dangers, and triumphs that await Amari on his quest to reclaim his legacy and save his people. Amari stepped off the small plane and into the thick, warm air of the African countryside. The sun hung high in the sky, casting long shadows over the air, and the wind smelled different here, rich and full of life, with hints of spices and wood smoke. This was the place his father had told him about all his life, the village of his ancestors, the land of kings. Now, after years of hearing stories, he was here, ready to take his place as their leader. But as he looked around, Amari could sense that something wasn't right. The village looked tired. The trees, which his father had said were once strong and full of life, seemed to sag, their leaves heavy with some invisible weight. The wind blew softly, but it felt like a whisper, carrying with it a sadness that Amari couldn't quite understand yet. Beside him, Zola, his childhood friend, and now his closest companion, took it all in with wide, amazed eyes. She had never been to Africa before, and she was fascinated by the vibrant colors, the earthy smells, and the people bustling around them. She had come with Amari to support him, but even she could feel that the village wasn't as it should be. Amari's father, Kofi, had told him stories about this village since he was a little boy. He spoke of the strong bonds between the people and the spirits that lived in the land, the spirits of the trees, the rivers, and even the winds. The spirits helped guide the people, but only if they were respected and honored. Kofi had warned him that when the spirits were upset, the village would suffer. And now, standing here, Amari could feel it in his bones. Something was wrong. As they walked through the village, people came out of their homes to greet him. They smiled and waved, calling him Prince Amari, but their eyes didn't match their smiles. There was worry and sadness in their faces. They had waited a long time for their prince to return, but it seemed they were also hoping for him to fix something, a problem much bigger than him. Amari could feel the pressure building in his chest. He had come here to become king, but now he realized it wouldn't be as simple as he thought. There was more to this than a ceremony of wearing crown. Something had happened in the village, something he would have to understand and fix if he was going to lead these people. Amari knew he needed to seek help. His father had often spoken of Mama Zola, the village elder. She was wise beyond her years, and she had a special connection with the spirits. Kofi had told Amari that when he had faced his own challenges as a young man in the village, it was Mama Zola who had helped him through. We need to find Mama Zola, Amari said to Zola as they walked through the village. She will know what's going on. They made their way to the edge of the village where Mama Zola's hut stood tall among the ancient trees. The moment they entered the clearing around her home, Amari could feel a shift in the air. It was quieter here, like the trees were holding their breath, waiting for something important to happen. When they arrived at the hut, Mama Zola was already outside, sitting on a wooden stool. Her silver hair shimmered in the sunlight, and her eyes, deep and wise, looked at them as if she already knew why they had come. "You've returned just as I knew you would," Mama Zola said, her voice soft but strong. "But you didn't come just to take the throne, did you? You feel it, don't you? The trouble in the village." Amari nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "Yes," he said. "Something is wrong. The trees, the wind, it feels heavy, like the whole village is sad." Mama Zola nodded, her face serious. "The spirits are upset," she said. "The balance between our world and the spirit world had been broken. The Olu Iwi, the great spirit that protects the forest, is hungry. You must seek the Olu Iwi and restore the balance, or the village will continue to suffer." Amari felt a chill run down his spine. He had known there would be challenges, but this sounded far more serious than he had imagined. "What must I do?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "The Oluiwi will test you," Mama Zola said. "You will face 3 trials: the trial of heart, the trial of strength, and the trial of truth. Only by passing these trials can you restore the balance and prove that you are worthy to lead this village." Amari swallowed hard. The thought of facing 3 trials made him nervous, but he knew there was no other way. "I'll do it," he said, his voice filled with determination. Zola stepped forward, her hand resting on his arm. "We'll do it together," she said, her voice steady. "You don't have to face this alone, Amari." Mama Zola smiled, her eyes softening as she looked at the two of them. "Your bond is strong, and that will help you on this journey," she said. "But remember, Amari, a king must be wise and brave. You will need both to pass these trials." The next morning, Amari and Zola set out for the sacred forest. The village elders had warned them of the dangers that lay ahead, but Amari was not afraid. He felt connected to this land, even though he had never lived there. His father had told him stories of how spirits of their ancestors lived in the trees, in the rivers, and even in the wind. As they walked deeper into the forest, the air grew quiet, and the sunlight barely broke through the thick canopy of leaves above. "We're getting close," Zola whispered, her eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. The forest felt alive. It was watching them. Every rustle of leaves seemed to be a whisper from an unseen spirit. Hours passed, and finally they reached a clearing where a massive tree stood, towering over the forest. Its bark glowed faintly in the dim light, and the air around it felt heavy, like it was with an ancient power. This was the place where the Olu-Iwi lived. "This must be it," Amari said, his voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to shake, and from the base of the tree, a figure began to rise. It was enormous, made of vines and branches, with glowing eyes that watched them carefully. This was the Oluiwi, the spirit of the forest. "You have come to seek my wisdom," the Oluiwi said, his voice deep and rumbling like thunder. "But wisdom must be earned. You must prove yourself worthy." Amari took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I'm ready," he said, even though his heart was racing. The Oluyiwi looked at him for a long moment before nodding. You must face 3 trials, it said. The trial of heart, the trial of strength, and the trial of truth. Only by passing these trials will you restore the balance and be worthy to lead. Amari nodded, feeling both fear and determination. He knew this wouldn't be easy, but he couldn't turn back now. The village was counting on him. The first trial began almost immediately. Amari was no longer in the forest. He found himself standing in the middle of a vast, open plain with a deep, dark gap in the ground before him. On the other side of the gap stood his parents, younger than he had ever seen them. They were calling out to him, their voices soft but filled with love. They asked him to cross the gap to join them. His heart ached to be with them, to feel the warmth of their embrace. But the gap was wide, and there was no way to cross it. Amari's heart pounded in his chest. His parents were everything to him, and the thought of not reaching them made him want to jump across, no matter the danger. But something in his heart told him to stop. The gap was too wide, and as much as he wanted to go to them, he knew this wasn't real. These aren't my parents, Amari whispered to himself. This is a trick. He knew that his real parents wouldn't ask him to do something impossible. So therefore, he took a step back, refusing to cross the gap. As soon as he made that decision, the figures of his parents disappeared, and the gap in the ground closed. He had passed the trial of hearts by trusting his instincts and knowing what was real and what wasn't. Before he could catch his breath, the second trial came. Amari found himself back in the forest, but this time a giant creature was charging towards him. It was a Ngrumo, a thunder beast with glowing eyes and a roar that shook the ground beneath him. The creature's massive paws hit the earth like thunder, and his eyes locked onto Amari. Amari's legs trembled with fear, but he knew he couldn't run. He didn't have a weapon, just his own strength and determination. The Ingrumo lunged at him, its sharp claws reaching out to strike. But Amari grabbed a heavy branch from the ground and held his ground. With all his strength, he swung the branch at the beast, striking it with every ounce of power he had. The battle was fierce, but Amari refused to give up. With one final blow, he struck the Ingrumo, and it vanished into the shadows, disappearing into the mist. He had passed the trial of strength by standing his ground and fighting back, even when he was afraid. Exhausted but determined, Amari now faced the final trial. The Oluyiwi appeared once more, holding a large, shimmering mirror in its hands. Look into the mirror and see the truth, it said. Amari hesitated for a moment before stepping forward and looking into the mirror. But instead of seeing his own reflection, he saw the faces of his ancestors. Kings and queens from generations past stared back at him, their eyes filled with pride and expectation. Do you accept your place among them? The Oluyiwi asked. Amari felt the weight of their gazes, and for a moment doubt flickered in his heart. Could he really live up to the legacy of his ancestors? Could he be the leader the village needed? But then he thought of everything he had been through. He wasn't just the boy from America. He wasn't just a prince from this village. He was both. He was a bridge between two worlds, and that was his strength. I accept, Amari said, his voice steady and sure. The mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the Oluyomi nodded. You have passed the trials. The balance is restored, and you are ready to lead. Amari returned to the village, his heart full of pride and relief. The news of his success spread quickly, and the villagers rushed to greet him. The air, which had felt heavy and sad before, was now light and full of joy. The trees, which had sagged under some invisible weight, now stood tall and proud. The spirits of the land were at peace once more, and so were the people. Amari's grandparents were the first to greet him, their faces shining with pride. His father, Kofi, and his mother, Clara, stood nearby, smiling with relief and joy. Amari had passed the trials, and now he was ready to become king. But the celebrations weren't over yet. The village had prepared a special ceremony to mark the beginning of Amari's reign, a marriage to Zola. The villagers had watched as Zola stood by Amari through every challenge, and now she would stand by him as his queen. That evening, under the stars, the village gathered once more. The drums beat in time with the heartbeats of the earth, and the night air was filled with the scents of flowers and fresh earth. Zola, dressed in traditional Maasai clothes, stood beside Amari, her face glowing with happiness. Mama Zola, the wise elder, stood before them, her voice clear and strong as she led the ceremony. Today we celebrate not only a king, but the union of two hearts, she said. Together, Amari and Zola will lead us into a new era of peace, love, and balance. Amari and Zola exchanged their vows, their voices steady and filled with love. Amari felt the weight of the moment, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt right. He was not just a boy from America or a prince from the village. He was King Amari, and Zola was his queen. Together, they would lead the people with wisdom, strength, and love. As the ceremony ended, the village erupted into cheers. The night was filled with dancing, laughter, and music that echoed through the hills. Amari and Zola joined in the celebration, their hearts full of joy and hope for the future. As they stood together, watching the people of the village celebrate, Amari knew that this was only the beginning of their journey. He had come back to the village to restore balance. And now, with Zola by his side, he was ready to lead. The stars above them twinkled brightly, as if the spirits themselves were watching and smiling down on the new king and queen. Together, Amari and Zola would guide the village forward, their hearts full of love, their hands joined in unity, and their future bright with promise.